behalf of the Skid Row community, we would like to send our thoughts, our prayers, and our condolences to everyone that lost their lives in 2011 in Skid Row. Now, last year, in December 21st, 2011, it was National Homeless Persons Memorial Day. And I'm holding right now in my hand a program from the event that took place in Skid Row. Now, there were over 100 names that were read aloud during that event of the people that died in Skid Row in 2011. So again, we send our thoughts, our prayers, and our condolences to each and every last one of them and their loved ones. Now, in this speech today, you will not hear statistics, famous quotes, or heartfelt, compelling stories like from Jim in Idaho, Peggy Sue in Pennsylvania, or Miss Wilma Washington in South Carolina. Because in Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles, we don't exploit the names and faces of people that are down on their luck, and for the majority, at the lowest point of their lives. Yes, I'm talking about that Skid Row, the only place that is known as the homeless capital of the United States of America. Some say it's the land of society's unwanted, or the bottom of the totem pole of life. In this world, there is an unseen race to the top, a rat race to take the throne. Well, what I would like to know is, who is going to take the throne? The throne down, the throne to the side, and the throne away, that is. The American taxpayers also have a right to know. After all, it is our taxes that are going into the money pot that is keeping this once proud country afloat. Now, let me be clear before I proceed, because I don't want to come off as being anti-American. Because when I say once proud country, I'm merely comparing today's America to not long ago, where the United States of America was the greatest country in the world, with an enormous surplus and folks everywhere risking their lives to come to this land of opportunity so that they and their families could happily pursue the American dream. Now, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of proud citizens in this country still today. And how do I know, you ask? Because I see a lot of them every day struggling to survive in the streets of Skid Row, trying to fend for themselves, trying to do things the right way, trying not to take a handout. But all the while, suffering from poverty. They're embarrassed and dejected because the rest of this country looks down upon them. Sure, there are addicts in Skid Row, but people do drugs all over the world. And yes, there are criminals in Skid Row, but people commit crimes all over the world also. For instance, white-collar criminals like Bernie Madoff and Alan Stanford. They don't live in Skid Row. Yet what many courts in the judicial system declare to be low-level crimes are looked down upon with utter disgust. And once these folks that are convicted and they take plea bargains to reduce their jail time, and let's be real, no one wants to go to jail or prison. But a lot of times people take plea bargains because they simply can't afford a proper defense. Not necessarily because they're guilty. But when they do this, they become felons and are spat upon by the rest of society. And without any realistic chances of quote unquote making it, in society, the majority of these folks at some point usually wind up passing through Skid Row. So what happened to the once you pay your debt to society, all is forgiven things? And don't get me started talking about debt. It seems kind of odd, but here in California, the education budget is always the first to get hit and the hardest to get hit. Time and time again. For decades, this has been happening. What does that have to do with Skid Row? I'm about to tell you. Because the high school dropout rates are steadily increasing, and now even the middle school dropout rates are rising. But without a GED or a high school diploma, how can someone get a job? As a result, a person usually thinks that they have to turn to a life of crime in order to survive. And with the education budgets hitting the inner cities the hardest, the majority of the jails and prisons are filled with minorities. So there is this irony. In that Skid Row residents. So there's this irony that Skid Row residents are also mostly made up of minorities. Now, with California having more prisons than any other state in the country, 33 to be exact, it was recently ordered by the Supreme Court to release over 30,000 inmates to ease overcrowding. Many of these folks will also end up in Skid Row, where there is already a shortage of housing and adequate services to help the homeless that are already here. I know some of you are thinking, well, what does that have to do with me? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I'm going to tell you right now. Because time is of the essence, and that proverbial last straw that will break the homeless camel's back has already landed. And now it is only a short matter of time before the impact is felt, and the weight from all the overbearing issues will completely break the current system that is in place, causing a total collapse of the entire Skid Row infrastructure. And once that happens, every last one of us will feel that impact. And that's why that should matter to each and every one of you right now. In other words, instead of educating these folks so that they can graduate, get a job earning a decent wage, and contributing to the pot, they're reduced to ongoing incarceration, endless hospital visits, including expensive emergency room visits. And of course, all the funding, the endless funding that goes towards housing for the homeless, the shelters, and the services that are also attached. In other words, this devastating cycle needs to be broken before the entire American economy is broken because of it. In this day and age, we need all hands on deck. All able-bodied citizens should be contributing to the pot. But it first starts with their ability to be allowed to contribute. In Skid Row, there are many flaws in the current Skid Row infrastructure, thus severely damaging the foundation which prohibits the ability to achieve proper functionality and true rehabilitation. For instance, there are Skid Row nonprofit organizations that utilize the harm reduction recovery model, which actually is a bad thing. The reason why I bring that to the table, even though there's AA, NA, CA, 12 steps, and many other recovery models, harm reduction is a very dangerous and confusing recovery model. Now, the basic principle of harm reduction is to actually condone drug use and quite possibly alcohol abuse at the same time. But as long as you do it within the confines of an individual's housing unit, which is supposed to cause less harm to the rest of the community and the public. And you may hear about the clean needle exchange programs, which is a good thing on the surface, but something illegal has to go inside of those needles. So how is that a good thing? And how does that help our community? And where do they get the drugs from? And with the concepts of supply and demand, there's an understanding why there's a high concentration of drug dealers in Skid Row. Other issues in Skid Row. There is a lack of family housing in Skid Row. To be specific, there is 0 family units in Skid Row. Yet there is a growing rise in the increase of mothers with children already in and coming to Skid Row. We also need each and every single sidewalk sanitized and disinfected for public health and safety reasons. We also need a total abolishment of the overnight guest fees that come from the charges by the SRO Skid Row landlords. And for those that don't know, in addition to receiving reduced rent from the residents and the government subsidy for the rest of the entire rent, there is an additional fee that is charged every time a tenant wants to have a guest visit. And the last I checked, in this country, anytime money changes hands in a business matter, Uncle Sam gets his cut. In regards to overnight guest fees in Skid Row, I don't know that Uncle Sam gets his cut. We don't even know where that money goes. There are answers and there's accountability that needs to happen. There are many more issues other than this in Skid Row. Too many to address today, but I will say this: the Skid Row nonprofits, the missions, and the social service providers all need to be held accountable for their lack of results as it relates to the millions and millions of dollars that they receive each year on behalf of the Skid Row community. We simply need stronger transparency, stronger oversight, and stronger accountability. Now, speaking of money, I want to offer solutions that may apply to many of you all here listening today. Now, when the stimulus package came around years ago, it was $700 billion that went into a pot that was with the specific purpose of stimulating the economy. Now, I didn't come up with this solution. Let me just clarify that now. But if someone in Skid Row brought this to my attention, and it was so good, I thought I'd share it with you now. But with the population of around 300 million people in America, if every person was given $1 million, after that, there would be $699.7 billion left in the pot to address all of the bailout packages, all the stimulus efforts, and all the economy reviving projects and programs. And I'm sure that the majority of you hearing this would be more than satisfied with this potential solution. And I feel that is something that we seriously need to consider moving forward as a country. Now, let me take a moment to address something else, because it's a current topic with all the attention given to the Occupy movement. And I just feel the need that I need to clarify a few things on behalf of the Skid Row community. Now, while it may sound good that there's this us versus them mentality, and it's just a tremendous feel-good story, Skid Row's issues are not the same as that of the 99 percenters. Our issues existed decades before the Occupy movement. Folks have been abandoned and left to live in tents and occupy tents in Skid Row for generations. To us, when you do the math, there's the upper 1%, there's the middle 98%, and then there's the bottom 1%, what we like to call the other 1%, that is left for the homeless and society's unwanted. There is no way that a middle-class family can claim to suffer in the same way that a homeless family does. So to all you occupiers out there, please respect us and stop using our people to strengthen your numbers. And stop using our issues to stockpile your concerns. Now, while there may be some issues that are similar, there are many issues that are far different. But there are many more of us in our community that feel that our issues are more important than yours. No disrespect, but that's just the way it is. And for many of us in Skid Row, a lot of us have lost hope. There is no sense of urgency in fixing the problems in Skid Row, and that frightens us. We are left feeling as if folks have somehow wished that we would magically disappear and just the problems would go away. The Skid Row problem. There's nowhere for us to go. We've already gone away from society. Society has already forsaken us. That's why we're in Skid Row right now. But be reminded that there are also homeless vets that fought proudly for this country living in Skid Row right now. There are also mothers with children living in Skid Row right now. And I would hope that people would not wish them to just simply die a lonely death on the Skid Row streets. And let me be clear, if you can hear my voice right now, you cannot say that you didn't know. So now the question is, what are folks going to do about it? Because right now, the Skid Row community is officially crying out for help. So please help us. We are dying here. And with that, I want to say, may God bless you, may God bless America, and may God bless Skid Row. Thank you.